We need to talk about KSP2's specifications released on Friday over on the Intercept Discord. Hello everyone, Karnasa here, and this will be a bit of a departure from my usual videos, but with the release of KSP2 in less than a week now, and the overall shock of what system you need to run the game, what better time to talk about it? I'm certainly not the most qualified to talk about the development process. I'm not a game developer, I just study computer science at uni, my only experience of game development being a 3-month module I took last year. So, don't take my word as gospel. I've tried to do my research on this, but I may get some things wrong, and if I do, please let me know in the comments. Firstly, the specs themselves. Currently, the minimum requirements are steep. An RTX 2060 for the GPU, while being a card from 5 years ago and a somewhat beginner level GPU, is still a higher requirement than roughly 65% of users on Steam currently have. You can find the full hardware survey that I got this information from in the description of this video, so you know I'm not just pulling numbers out of my arse. With only 35% of Steam users having the minimum recommended requirements, a large proportion of the audience for this game will not have the hardware to play. And it only gets worse if you look at the statistics for the recommended settings. Just over 3% of Steam users have the hardware listed for recommended, that being an RTX 3080 or better. Understandably, quite a lot of people were and are upset. Since releasing the specs, there has been one update over on the Discord, which state that these systems requirements are to ensure a high quality experience while playing KSP2 in a variety of in-game scenarios. KSP2 will work across a wide variety of hardware beyond what is listed in our recommended specs, with performance scaling based on the size and complexity of the crafts you build. Throughout the early access period, our development team will continue to prioritize performance optimization to ensure an optimal gameplay experience for as many Kerbinauts as possible. We hear you and we take your feedback very seriously. You are a core part of the development process, so please continue to share your expectations for what you want your KSP2 experience to be. This update also noted that the minimum specs were for low settings at 180p, and the recommended was for high settings at 1440p, and as of now, it is still unknown what sort of frames will be achieved with those settings with the hardware mentioned. The middle couple of paragraphs from the update are somewhat promising. The game being early access will likely, over the course of early access and even further, have many updates to its optimization, ensuring that the game runs smoother and hopefully meaning less advanced cards can handle. Having personally played KSP1 since early beta, I know that the performance difference since those early beta days to what we have now is remarkably different. However, that being said, there is also the elephant in the room. When the game first releases next Friday, it will be very bare bones. There will be no implementation of colonies, interstellar travel, science, exploration, or multiplayer. These will be added in the lead up to 1.0, but with such large features being added over the course of early access, that could lead to the game potentially requiring more resources to run. One hope is that these specifications released so far are taking these updates into consideration already, and that the devs had this in mind when the specs were released, but as of now, I can only speculate. A big concern to counter this is the early access footage we've already seen. Many of the videos and short sneak peeks of the game that have been released so far have been quite choppy. The EVA clip in low Kerbin orbit next to a space station being one that springs to my mind immediately. When Kerbin is observed, the frames achieved are markedly lower than what is seen when viewing the space station with nothing but the vacuum of space in the background. With little to no real-time gameplay footage so far, it is incredibly difficult to judge how it will run. Once again, this is something that all users will only be able to discover next Friday. The update mentioning that hardware other than what is listed in the specs will be able to run the game is a curious addition. If this is the case, why not reflect that in the specifications released? One speculation I have about needing an RTX series for even the minimum requirements is that ray tracing will feature within KSP2, and as of now in the early access release, it may be entirely impossible to turn off. Non-RTX cards can utilize this feature, but without having dedicated ray tracing and tensor cores, the GPU performance may massively suffer due to how intensive ray tracing is to utilize. If this is the case, and once again this is entirely speculation, one hope is that in a future optimization update, further graphical settings are introduced to disable ray tracing within the game. Another speculation, this one backed slightly by the CPU requirements for the game, is that the vast majority, if not all of the physics processing in KSP2 will be performed by the GPU rather than the CPU. KSP1 is very intensive on the CPU, as this is the piece of hardware that does all physics calculations within the game, and being, well, a physics simulator, that's quite a lot. Moving that processing to the graphics card may be an attempt at fixing that, freeing up headroom for the CPU to work on other processes within the game. The requirements, as stated by the devs so far, are definitely higher than what you'd expect from a game of this graphical style. To put it into perspective, games such as Cyberpunk 2077, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Remastered, Hogwarts Legacy, and Red Dead Redemption 2, all regarded as intense graphical games, fall way short when it comes to the requirements that KSP2 is currently stating. In fact, from my brief search through Steam, looking through this information, I've not found a single game that recommends anything near the level of a 3080. And in fact, the highest recommended I've found was Halo Infinite, which recommends a 2070. Something clearly doesn't meet the eye here. I'm sure KSP2 will be more graphically demanding than the first game, but at the same level as some of the previous titles just mentioned. Now, that does seem a bit odd. One hope for this is that the developers are being overly cautious with the requirements for now. As previously mentioned, they have stated KSP2 will work across a wide variety of hardware beyond what is listed in the recommended specs. What we're seeing here could be the upper limits of how the game handles when you decide to make a 10,000 part craft. I seriously doubt this, but it is something to consider. The last paragraph mentioned in the update, the developers state they're taking the feedback seriously, and at least one positive of the release of the specs is they've done this before the game has gone on sale. So at least they've been somewhat upfront about the specifications before taking your money, even if the specs have been announced maybe a little too close to the game's release for a lot of people's comfort. That being said, there are still no official specifications provided on Steam. The only ones currently publicly available are the ones posted on the Intercept Discord. So who knows, maybe that will change before next Friday, but I feel that's unlikely and probably pure copium at this point. One positive about having such high minimum and recommended specs for the game is hopefully that will at least mean it will be future-proof for the foreseeable future. KSP1 came out nearly 12 years ago. Sure, there have been lots of updates, but when the base software is that old, there's only so much you can do before moving on to the next iteration. This is the next iteration, and well, with those requirements, hopefully we can see the game continue to be updated and remain relevant graphically for some time yet. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that will cry, well, mods make KSP1 look just as good, if not better, than KSP2 already, and I can run those on my potato of a PC. Well, maybe, but with future optimizations and updates to the game, that may all change. And once again, the game isn't even out yet. This entire video has been mostly speculation, and come next Friday, everything I've said could be completely and utterly wrong, and the game very well might run on your GT 640 card from 10 years ago at 4K and 60 frames per second. It absolutely won't, but you never know. At the end of the day, even if you're not sure whether you can run the game, you can always purchase it from Steam, try it out for less than a couple of hours, and request a refund if the game isn't as playable as you'd hoped. And later down the line, with further optimizations, you may be able to pick it back up again. I'm fairly confident that most of the GTX 1000 series should be fine for running the game. Beyond that, things might get a little dicey, but we shall see. I will be live streaming the game pretty much as soon as it releases, and I can get it downloaded next Friday. So if you want to see how the game holds up on a 3070 Ti with a 9th generation i5 CPU, be sure to check that out. I could go on more about this topic, but I think I've said enough for one video, for now at least. I do wonder though, if these release requirements will have a big impact on the amount of people picking up the game at launch, or at least when it enters early access. I really do want the game to succeed. My entire channel is pretty much built around the first one, and I do have many plans already for the second game. For those of you wondering, Farewell Juna is coming. It's just taking a little longer because my first copy of the script got deleted because I, like the idiot I am, didn't back it up. That, on top of having no time to work on it on account of in real life events, means at the earliest it won't be out until next weekend. So sorry about that, but I am working on it. Big thank you to Pentium, So Not the Hero Type, That Unreal Guy, Sunset Awesome, Zarietta, and the rest of my patrons and members for their continued support. I have been Karnasa, like and sub for more, and I will see you later.